Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. All right. So yesterday we were talking about HL7 message, right? We did have a brief description or brief information on HL7 message structure. We understood that whenever we want to go through an HL7 segment, each segment has its own name. That would be a three-letter acronym. And then followed by that, we have HL7 fields, and each field would have its own field position or field sequence. And we call them as field number one, field number two, field number three, four, five, and so on, right? So we have various fields, and out of those various fields, we can read through the field numbers and understand which specific field number has what kind of data, right? So from yesterday's session, we did see that PID 5 is dedicated for storing patient name. PID 7 is dedicated for storing patient date of birth. Similarly, there are other fields which are going to store certain kind of data point, and we call them as maybe patient's address, which is sent in PID 11. Then you have patient's phone number, which is sent in PID 13 or PID 40, and so on. So there are many other data points that we usually capture in real time, and those data points are seen in the PID segment. Okay, so this is what we have seen yesterday, and we'll continue from there and see what is components within the fields, and we'll also talk about what are the various message types that we have that we need to be aware of to start or begin the journey of HL7 messaging structure. So we did see from yesterday's example that we have patient name in PID 5. Usually, at times, what happens is the data point or data element that is present within a certain field can be further broken down into many more components. For example, as we can see here, when we talk about name itself, we know that PID 5 is for name, but name can be further broken down into first name, last name, middle initial. You have suffix, you have prefix, maybe suffix as junior, senior, something, or one, two, three, and maybe there would be some sort of prefix like doctor, and so on, right? So this field can be clearly broken down into multiple components. And whenever there is a field that has the opportunity to have multiple components in it, it is broken down into multiple components by the HL7 standards. Not necessary that every field should be broken down. Only certain fields are broken down into multiple components wherever it is applicable. And each component is separated from each other with the help of this symbol called caret. Okay. So as we can see here now, there is, let's say, this is the name of the patient, Test John M. And we have three components. This is component, this is one component, and this is another component. And these three components are separated from each other with the help of this symbol, as I said, called caret. And each component, like the field number or the field sequence, they have their own component number. So this is called as component number one. This is called as component number two. This is called as component number three, and so on. So each component number is dedicated for storing certain kind of data or certain category of data. So let's see how patient name can be broken down. So we have PID 5 is paid for patient name. Now you are going a step further and we are talking about component numbers. So we'll mention that component number here. So whenever you are reading through the HL7 fields or HL7 message, first first you would represent the segment name, and then you would represent the field number, and then you would represent the component number. So PID 5.1 is dedicated for last name. And then we have PID dot 5.2. which is dedicated for first name of the patient. And then you have PID 5.3, which is for storing middle initial. And then you have PID.5.4, and that is dedicated for suffix and so on. So there are other things like prefix. You also have date and time from when this name is valid. Um, and there are many other uh, components that are part of patient name. Okay, we are just looking at two or three components within patient name, but there are many more components in patient name than what you see here on the on this particular example. The idea is that to understand that wherever applicable, an HL7 field can be further divided into components. Each component is separated from each other with the help of this caret symbol. How do I know? Is it last name always? Yes, it is last name always because HL7 has defined it already. HL7 has clearly mentioned that this is the place where you would send last name. So whenever I am trying, let's say that I'm getting on a call with for development of an HL7 interface, and I say, um, can you, or someone tells me that, can you check the last name of the patient, then I would immediately go and check PID 5.1 because I know that PID 5.1 is the dedicated place for storing the last name, right? Similarly, same goes with first name, same goes with middle initial. These are fixed data placeholders, and these are stored in PID 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 respectively. Okay. But if you look at the date of birth of the patient, as you can see here, PID 7, it is not further broken down because there is no necessity to go ahead and do that. So HL7 did not do that. All that we have to do is to see what segments or what fields are broken down further into components and then follow the standard that is provided to us by HL7. We are not going to define the placeholders. We are just going to follow the placeholders that are provided by the HL7 standards. Okay. Next very important point is that you may be seeing few fields as blanks. For example, here PID 4 is left blank. Then you have PID 6, which is left blank. And then you have PID 9, which is left blank, and so on. So these fields are dedicated for storing certain data point. If that data point is not captured during the registration process, or if that data point is not available for some reason, then these fields are left to be blank. Just because data is not there here, you cannot go ahead and put name in this particular field. If the data point is not available to us from a front end or from the database, then we are going to leave it blank. In this particular situation, PID4 is patient's alternate medical record number. So that is not being used anymore in the higher versions from after 2.5. And then you have PID6, which is for mother's maiden name. In case if mother's maiden name is not captured during the registration process, then we are going to leave that as blank, right? So there is always possible that there may be few fields that will be there and which will not have data from the source system. And you can also see that we have many different fields in HL7 PID segment. Similarly, we have many fields in NK1. We have many fields in PU1. How many fields each segment can have is also predetermined by HL7. For example, if we talk about PID, we have 40 fields. Okay. And in MSH, you have 21 fields, and so on. So every segment has its own number of fields. Every field, if it is divided into multiple component, it has its own fixed number of components, which is already defined by HL7. Okay. So the key takeaways here are every segment will start with an acronym, a three-letter acronym. Segments are divided into fields. Fields can be divided into components if necessary. Okay, and few of the fields, if data points are not present for those specific fields, then we are going to leave them as blank, and we'll further continue with other fields that are present within the HL7 message. Okay, so that's how we read an HL7 message that we get. Now let us move to understanding a little bit deeper in terms of HL7 message types and event types, right? So let me go ahead and bring up a slide. All right. So this is the message structure that we have seen just now. And then you have, yesterday we did go through this a little. So we will get little deeper, or we'll understand a little deeper from a real-time scenario perspective. So we talked that patient walking into the hospital, and then he is talking to the receptionist to get registered. So patient will obviously go ahead and get registered, provide the data that is necessary. And once the patient is registered, the data is sent from PM system to EHR system. As this event is sending the data from one system to another, this is called as a trigger event. So official definition of trigger event says this. The standard is written from a perspective that an event that is happening in the real time will have the need for the data to be sent from one system to another. And if that event demands that sending of data from one system A to system B, then such kind of events are called as trigger events, because those events are actually demanding the data to be sent between two different applications, right? So if we talk about the real-time scenarios, apart from registration, there are many other events that will take place, right? After creating the patient, then the uh, obviously the receptionist would go ahead and create an appointment. And once the appointment is created, they will go ahead and patient will go ahead and meet the doctor. And even before meeting the doctor, there will be an event where vitals are captured, like blood pressure, height, weight of the patient, and so on. Whatever can be captured before meeting the doctor can also be done by the at the nurse station before meeting the doctor, right? So that is also another event. In this way, there are series of events that will happen when the patient comes to the hospital and before leaving. And it is not essential that all the events are trigger events, right? Only few of the events would be considered as trigger events, because those events will only demand the data to be sent from system A to system B. Patient getting registered demands the data to be sent, because that data should be sent from PM to EHR so that doctor can view the patient record. And the next scenario is like creating an appointment. An appointment creation is also a trigger event, because it is going to send an appointment creation email, appointment creation message to the EHR system. Now, once the patient is arrived at the nurse station for capturing vital information, height, weight, body mass index, and so on, uh, now that information is captured and stored in the EHR system itself. It is not necessary, or it wouldn't demand for the data to be sent, vital information to be sent from EHR to some other system, right? It is clinical data of the patient that is being captured, and that will be stored within the EHR system. So it is not very much essential that this has to be sent from system EHR system to other systems. So this is an event that has happened, but this is not a trigger event, because it is not demanding the data to be sent from another one this system EHR to another system altogether. So this way, not every event is a trigger event. Only events where the data is being sent from one system to another are called as trigger events. Okay, and then we have an observation or an order that is being placed. So that order information should flow from EHR to the lab. So that is a trigger event again. So if we categorize the hospital data section into or hospital workflow into various categories, we'll have five different categories. You have registration, you have appointment scheduling, then you have labs that are being created, then there is a pharmacy request prescriptions that are being sent out, and then finally you have invoices which are sent or basically you can call them as claims, which will be sent to the insurance companies to have their amount remitted. Right now, these are the names that we have in terms of HL7. Sorry, in terms of our generic language, right? But each of these events that we are seeing here, each of these sections or categories that we are seeing here, has a dedicated name in terms of HL7. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. The first one is registration. So when we talk about registration, we see that it is called as ADT. ADT is an acronym again, and this is called as message code. Message code will help us to go ahead and determine what is the category of events that were happening, and it will broadly categorize the message type or events that we are going to trigger. ADT stands for admit, discharge, and transfer. So anything that is represented or anything that is related, any event that is related to admission, discharge, or transfer will fall under this particular category, and the message code is ADT. Next one that we have is appointment scheduling, and we have a message code called SIU. SIU stands for Scheduling Information Unsolicited. Okay. And then next, what you have is lab orders. We have two different categories here. One is ORM, which is observation request message, which is requesting some sort of observation to be performed by the lab. So that's the reason it is called as ORM. And then you have ORU, which stands for Observation Result Unsolicited, which means it is a result of the observation that is made. And whatever results you generate will fall under this particular category. And finally, you have claim registration, which is invoice generation, and you have DFT, which is detailed financial transaction. Okay. Now, these are going to broadly tell you under which category certain event is falling into. But if we also need to take a look at in little more granular manner on what events we have. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. So under registration, you have many different events. As I said earlier, we may have events like patient registration, patient update of the existing data. Patient might be having pre-existing diseases, like maybe cancer and so on, right? So, uh, patient might was in the hospital and they will get discharged. So discharge also is an event which is part of patient registration category itself. And you also have other events like patient getting transferred from one department to another, one hospital to another, or maybe hospital to clinic, or from hospital to home, getting discharged and all. So, discharge, transfer, and registrations, all of these events will fall under registration category. So, we are nitpicking few of them, which are most commonly used in our real-time interfaces. It doesn't mean that we are confined to these events only. Whatever I mentioned here on the screen are just one or two events that we most frequently see, but there are other events as well which fall under this category. The next we have appointments. There are three main sets or main categories of appointments, which is new appointment, appointment modification, and then appointment cancellation. So these are three different events under appointment, and then we have labs, we have orders and results. And like finally, we have billing related details. Now, these are again, as I said, these are individual events and these are in our local language terms. However, HL7 has their own dedicated naming convention and values or namings for each one of these events that we are talking about. Let's go ahead and take a look at them. So, if you see registration, new patient registration is called as an as A28. This is called as trigger event. Okay. Earlier, what we have seen, the broader category registration is ADT, and then we have new patient registrations now under ADT, which is represented with as ADT A28. And then you have update patient information, which is represented as A31. Okay. Now, you combine both the message code and trigger event to represent what message type you have. Let me show that in the HL7 message that we were looking at earlier. So this is the HL7 message that we have, right? And within this HL7 message, let's say we have it as A28. So now within this HL7 message, we have this field called MSH11. And in MSH11, you are showing what is the message type. So MSH11 is dedicated for sending message type. Message type is like name of the book. Okay. It is going to tell what kind of message we are looking at. So message type is always a combination of message code, which is nothing but ADT in our case, plus trigger event, which is A28 in this particular case. Okay. So message type is always going to tell us what kind of event we are looking at. So if we look at this message and if we find that it is A28, which means this particular message got generated whenever patient got registered in the front end system or EHR system or PM system, right? Similarly, if we look at another message type, let's say we are looking at another message example. Let me pull that out. All right. This is an ORU message. As you can see here, it says ORU R01. So ORU R01 is basically representing an ORU message, which is result related, observation result related category. And within that, we have R01, which is a result message. Okay. So that way we can clearly identify what kind of message we are looking at using this field MSH11, which acts as the name of that particular message, right? So similarly, if you go to appointment scheduling, you have three different events. You have new appointment, you have update of patient existing appointment information, and then you also have appointment, cancel appointment. Okay. So S12 is for new appointment. S14 is basically used for update of existing appointment, and then S15 is for canceling the appointment. If someone wants to cancel, they can go ahead and use S15. And then you have lab orders. So order O01 is used for orders, that is the event type. And then you have results R01, which is for receiving the results from the lab. And finally, you have PO3, which is for DFT. And this is going to represent all the billing related data that you are going to send from EHR to the receptionist desk. So what billing related details it might be? It might be charges with respect to doctor service. It may be charges with respect to additional procedures that the doctor might perform. Let's say a patient walked in with a wound and doctor is actually performing a suture. So doctor has provided his consult and that will be having certain charge. Doctor is going to perform the suture, so that will have certain charge and so on. So whatever the list of charges are, whatever services patient has rendered, all of those will be billed and their information regarding the services provided will be sent back to the receptionist desk. Receptionist will go ahead and generate a claim if the patient is covered insurance under insurance. Okay, so these are the few events that we have. And as I said earlier, these are not confined or events are not confined to the list that you're seeing here. There are more than 80 event types in within HL7 messaging standard, and there are more than 50 message types within HL7 messaging standard. So there are many more. Okay. So, any questions from anyone on these message types, message code, and event?
Yeah, good evening, Dixon. May I
Hey,
know what does DFT stands for?
DFT is for detailed financial transaction. So it is basically used for sending or sending billing related information that I just mentioned. What all services patient has taken, that will be sent over through DFT message to the billing system.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
morning.
Hey, Abdul, good morning.
Mhm. Yeah, I see radiology. But how about the radiology? There is no, I don't, there is no specific for radiology, only for lab.
No, no, no. There is. So you can use ORU R01 itself for radiology as well. If you are planning to transact imaging related data, or if you want to transact PDF related data, you still use ORU, but that is used there are few things that you have to alter in ORU OBX segment, and then you will be able to send out PDF information, then you'll be send out image related information. If you want to dedicatedly transact imaging data, which means actual images, then you will be using a different standard called DICOM, uh, and that will help you to transact byte data, which is the actual image. So if the image has to be transacted, you won't use HL7. If image related information like image link can be transacted in the ORU R01 message itself. So radiology, simple results, textual results, procedure results like PDFs, all of them will fall under this category of ORU R01.
Okay. How about pharmacy?
Pharmacy, you have other message types like OMP. You have pharmacy order, which will be used by OMP. You have RDE as well, where you have pharmacy administration related data that can be transacted. As I said earlier, whatever we have seen are the most frequent ones that we use in real time. But the list is not limited to what we have seen here. You also have VXU, which is used for immunization related data. You also have QBP, which is query by parameter interfaces. So there are many more message types. There, as I said, we have more than 50 message types and more than 80 events. What we have seen is just a small list that we most frequently encounter in real-time interface implementations.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. So let us now move on to the uh, message structures in detail. So now that we know what all messages we have, what all message types and event types we have, what we are going to do next is we are going to go through detailed structure of each one of these messages. And will take a look at each segment and we will deep dive into those segment structures, understand what all fields we have, and so on. So this is how we are going to proceed further. We are going to pick one message at a time. So for example, we looked at ADT messages, right? It may be ADT A28 or A31. We are going to take a look at what are the segments involved, present, and we will pick important fields in each segment. And we'll try to understand what is the importance of that field in real time. In case if there is any special explanation that is necessary to go through each one of these fields, when we are going through each one of these fields, then I will provide that explanation there from real-time workflow perspective. But apparently, we are going to see what all fields we have, what are important and really captured in the real-time world, and how where they are placed within the HL7 message. And then once we complete understanding the message structure totally, we will go through workflow scenarios, real-time workflow scenarios, this where this particular message type is used, what all scenarios we may encounter. For example, if we talk about patient registration or update of existing information, there are scenarios like avoiding patient duplication, How do you send out a message? How do you interpret a message? So we'll go through theoretical aspects of how these workflow scenarios would work for ADT 828 and 831. We will repeat the same cycle for rest of the message types like SIU, and then we'll also go and check DFT. We'll follow the similar pattern for ORM, ORU as well, so that we understand the message structures of each one of these segments, each one of these message types and their segments, and we'll also understand what is the importance of each of the fields for these trigger events as well. Okay, so we'll begin with ADT 828. Let's go ahead and quickly review the structure first. So let me go ahead and bring up a PDF. Okay, so first we'll begin with message type ADT A04 or A28 or A31. All of them more or less represent the same structure. As you can see here, ADT messages are used for any event that is related to admission, discharge, and transfer, as I mentioned earlier. And the HL7 message of ADT would contain these segments. You can see here that we have MSH, EVN, PID, PV1, GT1, and IN1. So there are 6 segments that I mentioned here. Is this the final structure of every ADT message? Not necessary. You may be seeing few ADT messages only having MSH, EVN, PID. You may be seeing few ADT messages which do not have this IN1 insurance segment at all. So what you're seeing here is based out of my experience. I have added all the common segments that are used in the real-time interface implementations. And we'll be going through each one of these segments. So first we'll begin with MSH segment, and then we'll move on with other segment structures as well. So MSH segment is basically used for storing message header related data. This is like index of a textbook. So let's say you have a school textbook, you will definitely have an index that will give you a brief overview of what that textbook is all about. It will also give you information on how many chapters or units you have in the textbook and what kind of information is present in each one of those units is also briefly provided in the index, right? Similarly, MSH segment is also an index kind of thing where it will tell who is sending the message, who is receiving the message, when the message got generated, and what version of HL7 message you are using, what kind of acknowledgement it has to trigger back. All of this information is present within MSH segment. So before we dive into understanding each one of these fields, let's understand the table that we are seeing here. Okay. So whenever we want to communicate about NHL7 specification, then we would use tables like this to represent the properties of each one of these fields. Okay. So here the first column is representing your field number. So we call, as we can see, we have MSH 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. These are telling you which field number we are talking about. Then the second column is length. A few of the fields in HL7 message are restricted to length. And if there is a number associated with a certain field, then you have to abide by that particular length. We cannot go ahead and have MSH 10 more than 199 characters. So you may be wondering what does it mean to be zero? So zero means that there is no restriction, you can send whatever you want to send. Okay. Next, what we have is data type. So data type is a very deeper topic. Usually, when we write program, if you have people here who are coding, then we all know whenever we are creating a variable, we do define the data type of that variable. Of course, depending on the language, though. In JavaScript, we may not, but in Java, we do, right? So, in the same way, HL7 standard has defined data types for each one of these fields, and there are 90 data types in HL7 version 2.5.1. And we will have dedicated sessions on what data types are frequently used. We'll be covering around 30 to 35 data types out of 90 that we have. Next, what we have is optionality, or you can say it as whether a field is required or optional. So HL7, while defining this particular standard, they have defined few fields to be required for sure. You cannot go ahead and miss sending the data for those fields. So wherever it felt that for a certain scenario, a field is important, then it would go ahead and mark that field as required. So as you can see here, we have required, and then you have O, which represents optional. Okay, you have other representations as well, like B, which is used for backward compatibility. Then you have C, which is nothing but conditionally required. Okay, then you will also see W, which means that it is withdrawn. So we already have in this particular message, we already have R, which is required, and then you have O, which is optional, and then we have C, which is conditionally required, and then we have B, which is backward compatible, and finally we have W, which is withdrawn, which means if certain field is withdrawn and you are not supposed to go ahead and use that particular field anymore in that specific version of HL7 message. Okay, for example, if we see PID segment, here you can see that we have W for PID 2 and 4, which means we are not supposed to go ahead and use those fields in any way for this specific version of HL7 messaging. Okay. Next, what we have is repeatability. So, or you can say that cardinality. Here it will define whether you can repeat the data within this particular field, right? In case if we have, or if we can repeat, then it would go ahead and mention it as star or that number. Star indicates there is no limit on how many number of times it is getting repeated, and there is no number as well. If you have just one, it means that that particular data point cannot be repeated. If there is no restriction like one, then it can repeat. Then you have table. We'll talk about tables also in detail as and when we go through understanding structure of these fields. Then finally you have the name of the or description of that particular HL7 field. Okay. So we'll be following this table in detail, going through, and we will understand what are the fields that are very, very important. Now, you may be wondering why if you are highlighted in green, we are not going to cover every field. If we cover every field, we won't be able to complete the training. So we are going to highlight only on few of the important fields that we see in real-time messages, and the green ones that are highlighted, yeah, is something that we are going to cover through the training. So for every segment, I have highlighted them, what are the important fields, and we'll be using this one itself. This pattern itself for all the rest of the HL7 messages as well. Okay. So that is about the table. In tomorrow's session, we will go ahead and take a look at um, what are various fields that we have, and we'll cover through every field that is highlighted in green here, and we'll understand the meaning of that particular field, and we'll also talk about the properties that are available here for that specific field and move on from there. Okay, so I'll open up for questions. Let's go to the question session. Any questions from anyone?
Hi. You
Hey,
said
Nikita.
ADT A31 and 28 are the like patient registration,
Mm-hmm.
but you are showing. Can you scroll up? It's
Yeah,
A04 and A08.
right. Outpatient registrations are used for or are represented through A04, where patient doesn't need to be admitted to the hospital. If patient is getting admitted, then you would use A01. There are other things like only patient information, addition of patient into one certain system can be represented through ADT A28. So in real-time implementations, people can use A04 for registrations. They can use A28 as well for registrations. And people can, or implementations can use A08 for updates and A31 also alternatively for updates.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions from anyone?
Is it the file format is a text file, or what is the format? Once the file is generated, HL7 is generated,
Mhm.
how it is readable? What's the format?
It is dot.
What
You can save it. There is no dedicated format as such. You can send it in a .txt file, or you can have the extension of .hl7 to represent that file. But it is, as I mentioned in yesterday's session, this is normal ASCII data. So it is a text information and readable, human readable form. So you can send it in Notepad if you want to. Apparently, that's not what we do. We'll send over TCP/IP in most of the cases, or SFTP. If it is SFTP, we are going to send the files extension. If the receiver wants the extension to be .hl7, then we can send that in .hl7, or you can store it as .txt as well. There is no specific restriction from that perspective of what extension you are using. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? All right. I'm not hearing anything. So let us go ahead and conclude today's session here. We'll catch up tomorrow and go through each of these fields, understand why these fields are used, in what context, and we'll continue with the rest of the entire list of segments that we have for ADT. Okay, thank you, everybody. You all have a great day ahead. We'll catch up tomorrow.